from our side. So we're very, very grateful to have you here today. Feel your career and passion by joining a board. Please also make sure that you are muted, as we have different speakers. We cannot mute everyone, otherwise our speakers will be muted, so that we avoid background as much as possible. The whole presentation will take about 1.5 hours, so that we also have sufficient time during the presentation, as I mentioned, and also afterwards for questions in case you have. And also feel free that if you when you digest all the information, if you have any questions popping up later after the webinar, feel free to contact us directly and share your thoughts and ideas and questions later on as well. We will first make an introduction to the speakers and to women in sustainable finance, and then we will hand over to our experts from Boreal, who will inform you on how boards actually work, where to find board seats, and of course the interactive question and answer session we should plan in the end. Women in sustainable finance. We have started 2 years ago, so we are not that old yet. We're quite a young organization, already international. And what we do is we share the power of two very strong forces: the power of capital and the power of equality and diversity. This, for us, is such an enormous, important topic. And Christelle Clémence, who is responsible for the strategical development at Women in Sustainable Finance, will share with you why this topic is so important to all of us. Gillian Mcnabb is a lawyer who actually lives what she preaches. She is an advisory board member of DART Talent and Executive Search herself, and she's a lawyer at Kinsey Haas McNabb, which is a Zurich-based boutique law, where she advises management and financial institutions in Switzerland and also abroad. Then we have the beautiful woman next to that is Delfin Trabaldo, who is heading the business and development partnerships at Boreal. She has a huge experience already in building her own company, but also more than 10 years experience in the financial industry in different capacities. And she really lives with all her passion and energy her function at Boreal, and she's a great person to work with. Donald Waterreus, who's also Dutch, as I am. We have met here in Switzerland, and as they say, you always meet twice in life. We used to work together at ABN AMRO Bank, and Donald has served in different positions within the financial industry, in different organizations, and also in different jurisdictions. He's an expert on advisory boards, and we're very happy to have him, that he shares his experience with us today. Well, the picture next to that, you see, that's me. My name is Edith Olivier. I'm one of the founders of Women in Sustainable Finance. And the reasons why we have established Women in Sustainable Finance is because we want to support and empower women within the financial industry to restore the equality. And we also want to make sure that capital is used in such a way that it gives a positive impact on our society and planet. But Women in Sustainable Finance, we truly believe that sustainability comes from inside out. So if you're really authentic on what you do and the purpose that you have in your life, what is it, your unique spot, your unique place that you deserve to be, and also the unique capacities being you that you can share with our society in your work and also in your private life. And that's what we would like to get out of you. We want to empower you and support you to get to this unique place where you belong. And because we are in the financial industry, we can combine this authenticity with capital. And that is such a powerful force. And therefore, we focus on 3 different pillars. The first one is personal transformation. Like I said, we truly believe that sustainability is an inside-out process. If you know who you are, where you are and where you want to be in life, that's a unique capacity that you can share with the outside world. The next pillar that we have is creating the right environment. We would like to empower you and we would like to support you, because the only place where we really would like to see you is to that place where you deserve to be within the financial industry, where you can make a positive difference. And therefore, we do mentoring programs, we have coaching programs, sponsorship programs within organizations, and we really focus on the action. And that's why we are also so grateful to have the connection and the partnership with Board Owl, because with this masterclass, and also what we really, our hope is what we can do is to get the women of our members, but also other people within the financial industry who are open for it, in advisory board positions where we can bring authenticity, equality, and sustainability, so where we can really make a difference in action. We also focus on sustainable finance, obviously, because that's our home base, and we do a lot of trainings, education, and webinars on everything that's related to it, on ESG, on how do we implement it in portfolios, impact investments, blended finance, and all other related topics. And as I said, my dear colleague, Christelle Clemens, she will tell you today and right now why we think that advisory board position is such an important topic for all of us. Christelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Edith. As well, a warm welcome from my side to this masterclass in collaboration with Board Owl. Today we are tackling the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, more precisely the target number 5.5. And this target aims to ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for management at all levels of decision making, whether in political, economic, and public life. It is important to mention that gender inequality is not only a pressing moral and social issue, but it as well a critical economic challenge. There has been progress the past years, but we are not there yet because there are still huge gaps all over the world. To give you some numbers which are indicative, if you look at the MSCI index, out of 2,765 companies, only 20% were women directors in 2019. And this was an approximative increase from 2% in 2018. Another analysis of more than 8,600 companies in 49 countries showed women held 16.9% of all global board seats. And if you look at Wikipedia, in 2018, women held 20% of the board seats on the Russell 1000 companies. And I think something is important, because if you look at those percentages for gender representation on corporate boards, those numbers, they refer only to public company boards, because private companies are not required to disclose information on the board of directors. So this is the reason why data is less accurate. What is as well interesting to see are the reasons which are behind those disproportionate gender ratio. And there is a survey of more than 4,000 persons in management, which show that male above 55 years old mention that the reason behind it is a lack of qualified female candidates. And if you look in the same study, if you ask women and younger men, directors, they will tell you that this is a male-dominated networking world. Could explain the reason for it. So advancing gender equality is not just an opportunity for countries, but also for companies in terms of performance. There is a McKinsey research dated 2020, which examined data of more than 1,000 large companies in 15 countries. And they found that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity were 25% likely to have above average profitability than companies in the fourth quartile. And companies in the top quartile of ethnic and cultural diversity were 36% more likely to outperform on profitability. So the highest performing companies on both profitability and diversity had more women in management roles. So Why diversity matters? Because there is diversity in diversity. Because diversity is not only gender, it is including ethnicity, cultural diversity, age, generations, international experience, sectors, religion, but as well, it includes people with disabilities, cultures, different origins, and as well, sexual orientation. And there is a significant correlation between a more diverse management and financial outperformance, because management roles, they matter. Now those numbers show that the inclusion of a highly diverse individuals and the different way in which diversity exists above the gender role, this can be a key, and this is a huge differentiator among companies. I can give you some more advantages, because diversity, it expresses a variety in a board culture. It enables new ways of thinking. It prevents groupthink. It encourages open dialogue, but as well debates, and it makes collaboration more efficient. And I think key is to say that diversity on the boards reflects the diversity of markets, customer, employees, which make a company cultures, but it as well on the other side to look at it, a public perception. There are differences in terms of government policies concerning the quota of women on boards. Not every country has the same rule, which can as well have an impact on the financial performance. For Switzerland, June 19th, 2019 was a very important day for Switzerland, because the Swiss Parliament has approved a proposal calling for better representation of women at the top echelon of large publicly traded companies. And this rule requires companies to set aside at least 30% of position in the boards of directors and 20% in the executive boards for women, and this for the next 5 to 10 years respectively. We're not there yet. Now we have about 1/5 of percentage of women in Swiss boards, and about 250 companies in Switzerland are affected by this measure. I think important to say as well that those firms which fail to achieve this minimum quota, they will be required to provide a justification. So we are moving forward, but we have less than 10 years to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. The reason why we have a call for action, and this is the reason why Women in Sustainable Finance, as Edith mentioned in the intro, is collaborating with Board All, because together we would like to empower women and have a valuable impact in the industry towards diversity. We have brought Board All to run this masterclass to help to this transition. And Donald, we are very curious now to hear from you how women can fuel their careers by joining a board. Donald, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christelle, for the introduction. Let me share the slides. So there we go. For the introduction, I quickly scanned through the participants. So yes, we're very happy as Portal that we can partner with you and share how women can fuel their careers. As a small disclaimer, because we want to be inclusive, everything that goes for women also goes for you, Tom, because I saw you're the only gentleman in the audience. It's been repeatedly mentioned that Portal and Women in Sustainable Finance are our partners. We are very happy to be partners, having a strong partner in Edith, both as a candidate as well as the responsible and co-founder for Women in Sustainable Finance. And we're of course happy for the opportunity to show what we can contribute to everybody in terms of boards. We are passionate about boards, we love boards, and that's why we have made it both our business as well as our mission to promote that. So in the next hour or so, over the various speakers, we hope that we will add value to you. We hope that you will learn. but I can guarantee you one thing, and that is that this next hour will be very interactive. We are not only soliciting your questions, as Edith said, but we actually are going to ask you some questions to make sure the interactivity is there and it stays entertaining for you and you stay engaged with that. We'll ask questions in the following kind of format. We'll show you a slide. We'll show you a question. In this particular case, it is, what is the brand of boots that you see here? Of course, the picture is a bit small, so I'll blow it up for you. And I would like you to help us practice our polling functionality and test to see that once we get to the real questions, we all know how to do it. So we will now launch a poll for you. Edith, are you launching the poll?
Donald, this is we practiced this, and well, Juliana is giving her answer. It says Doc Martens. I want to launch the poll, but now I get the answer that you're logged in from another device and the polling is inactive. So apparently I can not share the poll whilst you are on the screen. But that doesn't problem. I see that people are coming in with their answers via the chat. So thank you all for being so flexible. And we already have answers which are telling us that these are Doc Martens. Donald, is that the correct answer?
It is indeed the correct answer. Thank you very much. Probably not a surprise given the population. Tom, I don't know what he said. Maybe you find his answer, or maybe he didn't reply, Edith. But this indeed is a pair of women's shoes. It's actually the pair of boots of my daughter. So I took the picture myself, and we don't have any copyright issues. So I took this picture. Of course, we wanted to practice and also shock you a bit into immediate participation at the beginning of the masterclass. But there is a second purpose why I have this particular picture. We're going to share a lot of information with you. You will get all of this as a handout. And it is probably a lot of information. So actually, this picture is for me the essence of what I would like you to remember my contribution to this participation by. Because if you're a board member, there's one thing you have to be prepared for and you can never forget, namely that you will have to stand tall in your boots. You'll have to be confident and you have to speak up for yourself. How and what and when and why you will see throughout the course of the presentation, and we will refer to this lemma a few times. But if you remember this, you certainly have a concrete takeaway of today's masterclass. Immediately we would have the second question. So Edith, I assume that we're going to do it in the same way and ask for answers in the chat, or shall I stop the sharing and see if you can launch it then?
You can stop the sharing and then see how we can launch it then. And
I stopped it. Does it work now?
Let me check. Unfortunately not.
No. Okay. So we go back to the slides and you guys come with the answer to the question. Oh, that means I need to.
Aha, the person with the other profile who's logged in with my profile, that's most likely the reason why. In any case, Donald, feel free to continue. These things happen and we can deal with it. So people, please feel free to write your answer in the chat after Donald's question.
And the question is, on a scale from 1 to 10, at this very moment, how much do you feel you know about boards in general?
Oh, there's a lot coming in, Donald. It's actually also quite fun to watch this. We have scales from 3 to, well, actually from nothing. Some people say nothing. And the highest number I've seen so far is 8. But we see that a lot of people are stuck around number 5 comes up quite often, number 7. So, but the answers vary really from no information or experience at all to 8, where a lot of people are around. I would say the median would be 5.
So we have a perfect normal distribution, what you're telling us, across the scale from 1 to 10. So let's see what we can add to that in in the next hour or so and go into the presentation. Before I go to the actual topics, I would like to spend a little moment talking about the why of boards, and namely from two perspectives, from a company perspective and from a board member perspective. So on the left-hand side, why does every company need a board? Well, the easy answer to that is that for certain organizational forms, in Switzerland, for example, an AG or an SA, you are required by law to have a board. So it's a must-have when you establish the company. On top of that, certain industry impose on certain sizes of companies also a board to make sure there is a control mechanism in place. But we at Boartal, we go beyond that. As I said, we believe in boards, and we believe that a board should be a gremium of people not engaged in the day-to-day work and hence not encumbered by the urgencies of managing a company that still is available with its diversity, as Christel excellently pointed out to all of us. There's diversity in diversity. So the more diverse your board is, the more value the group of people can give to your board. And you have seen from the figures that Christel mentioned, there is a positive effect on your profitability and the success of your company. And that's why I believe that every company should have a properly staffed board. That can be a supervisory board and that can be an advisory board. Edith mentioned that, and that is less known. So we will spend time in this presentation also on the sense and nonsense of having an advisory board next to a supervisory board and what the combination can and should bring you. Then on the other hand, diverse boards don't exist if there are not people that want to be on board. So why do I want to be on the board? Well, the answer to that is very, very, very diverse. But basically, it's cool, it's fun, and it will help you yourself to grow, to develop, and to be a better professional ultimately. So we'll touch upon both of those topics, both different perspectives, repeatedly throughout the course of the slide deck. So, boards, how does it work? We'll have this little agenda that I will let you read. And we will go through the topics between the three speakers of starting with myself, then Gillian, then Delfin, and we will keep track of where we are on this agenda at the bottom of each slide. So just in case you started to get impatient, you know exactly where we are in terms of progress. So now let's assume you have agreed with the company to be on the board. And this is particularly true for supervisory boards, but to a certain degree also for advisory boards. You'll need to be briefed. What is it that is expected from you? So you will get what we call a shareholders brief. The shareholders brief has one issue. That is that sometimes it can be brief. It can be as short as this company needs to ensure sustainable, profitable growth. And sustainable here is in relation to growth and profit. So maybe a bit outdated, old-fashioned, maybe something of the beginning of this century. But of course, many companies, need to make profit to be able to continue to exist. So whereas no longer the complete truth, it is still something that needs to be taken care of. But it's not a lot of information if you get that. If you are a tech company, maybe the brief is, we are going to disrupt this industry. Yeah, and as a board member, you have to contribute to the disruption and to the transition of companies to a new technology. If you're a charity and you have I don't know the English word, a Stiftungsrat, probably foundation board. Of course, there's the do-good factor that needs to be in the forefront of the minds of all board members. Yeah? But it is topically that brief. And this starts to show you why you have to stand tall in your boots. You have to understand what you get. And after that, it's you. And that's why I have this second bullet. There's a famous quote by Harry S. Truman, the 33rd president of the United States. And he actually had made a little sign which he put on the desk on his desk in the Oval Office when he was president. And it had this quote, "The buck stops with you." And if you look into the anecdote, he has said that he put this sign there to remind himself every day when he stepped into the Oval Office and sat behind the desk that ultimately everything was his responsibility, and any decision escalated to him needed to be decided by him. There was nothing beyond him. It was be his yes or no, or do or don't. And we all know that Mr. Truman took a number of decisions that actually were super far-reaching. Some of them we're actually still living with the consequences today. Although Mr. Truman died almost 50 years ago, he was a president right after the Second World War, and he had to take decisions on the Marshall Help, the Cold War, and actually to end the war, the Second World War, the use of nuclear bombs. All of that still resonating today. He took those decisions. And as a result, as a president, he was one of the least popular presidents during his reign. I'm not sure if that is still true, if he's still the most unpopular, because now we had the 45th President of the United States who was just succeeded recently. Maybe they'll be fighting for that crown. But interesting enough, for Mr. Truman, if you ask historians today, 50 years later, they will tell you that he was one of the most influential.
I think Donald got stopped here. I don't know if you do not hear what I do not hear. There we are. We lost you for a second, Donald. But I hope now you're back. You're moving again. In the meantime, I'm very happy that we have a first question coming in. Thank you, Pamela, for asking the question and being interactive. The question, Donald, is there always a brief?
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me again.
Yes, we do.
Okay. It's a perfect question and perfect timing, because it actually takes me to the next slide. There should be a brief, and you know what? If there is no brief, you will demand it. And if demanding the brief itself is not enough, and it shouldn't be enough, and it isn't enough, there are things you need to do. Again, you have to stand tall in your boots, and you have to step up to the plate. You have to do your homework in terms of getting briefed, getting familiar with the organization that you're about to engage with. Every question you can come up with, is a question you do need an answer on, because later on you might be asked this question. And you have to educate yourself. So it's self-teaching. You can ask a company when you start anything you want, and you will get an answer. You're the board. You're ultimately responsible. So you will get an answer on anything. That can be, if you start to think about it, what is this company about, but also what is the competitive environment, which jurisdictions are we in, what is the tax environment we're under, there's a never-ending profitability, competition, technological development. There's an almost endless list of things you can and should dive into in the beginning to brief yourself, to educate yourself about what the company is all about. We made here a little box with 10 odd points as a reminder. Of course, you will get the PDF version of these slides after the masterclass, and you will have this on record, so there's no need to start writing. But you see, the list is very long, and the asterisk says it's not exhaustive. Everything you think you need to know about the company, you dig into, and you let the company brief you on that. Your predecessor, the chairman, the CEO, whoever it is, you need the answers. Once you're in the board, once you start to participate and take decisions, you will be co-responsible on it, and then you will have had this behind you. Then, beyond education, you also have to understand who it is you're dealing with. There are different stakeholders in and around a company, and they may have different drivers in terms of what it is they want from the company and what they think their position is. As a quick comparison, as a quick a picture to illustrate this, that position of a board member reminds me of the good, fast, cheap trilemma that you may have seen before. If you want something to be done good and fast, you know it won't be cheap. And if it's good and cheap, well, it will take a while. And obviously you see the last one coming. If something is fast and cheap, you can bet it won't be good. But where does the client always expect you to be? That is smack in the middle of this perfect storm. The same is true for board members. You have shareholders that may want profit or that may want disruption. At the same time, you're dealing with an executive management that may be completely absorbed at a certain moment with problems. If I today think about Credit Suisse and UBS, where the executive management is absorbed with legal cases, that takes a lot of substance and energy of the executive management team that may not go into what shareholders want. If I think of AstraZeneca trying their best to come up with a solution to the pandemic, and then the whole world looks upon them as if they created poison, yeah, that absorbs an executive management team. And then you have colleagues in the board. Colleagues may represent certain shareholders, and Gillian will tell you afterwards what a board member is responsible for and to whom. But certain board members may be seen as proxies for the shareholders or have their complete private agendas of why they are on the board and what they want with the company. To make it even more complicated, we added here auditors. Because they report directly to the board, and they of course will demand sometimes urgency for problems that they spot. And again, you are smack in the middle of all of this. So this is probably the first slide of a few that you will see in the course of the presentation that seem a bit daunting, that seem a bit heavy. So my God, what I'm getting myself into. Well, coming back to the previous slides, a good brief, a good education, and a good understanding at the very beginning is crucial to have a basis to start from. Then, on an ongoing basis, we suggest at Bortaal that you don't rest with just reading the prep material and showing up at 5 minutes to 9 on the day or the half day of the board meeting. You may see certain people do that. We certainly recommend that that is not the way in which you get most value. We suggest that in between board meetings, and that can be once, 4 times a year, or even more frequent, depending on the situation of a company, the size of a company, you spend some time in bilateral discussions, namely with the executive management, and if necessary, also with other departments in the organizations. Let's assume you are the digitalization expert on the board. I think a very apropos example, and you are there to share your know-how. You have to understand the IT department of that particular company. So you will want to know the head of IT, even if he's not in the executive management team, or maybe the capabilities of the IT department. Our recommendation is make your hands dirty, do the legwork, have bilateral discussions with the relevant people to you. If you do that on top of reading your prep materials and appearing in the meetings and being engaged, then you are properly prepared and you will enjoy the discussions and you will enjoy the value you add to the discussion in the board and the direction of the company. I hope it is a long answer to the question if there always is a brief.
Thank you, Donald.
Was there a further question?
Yes, it brings up a very practical second question from Isabella. Thank you, Isabella, for sharing. The question, in case of startups, it's quite tricky as the information that you can get are quite vague, and more than in more established companies, sometimes also hard to get. Do you have suggestions which are better fitting the startup or SME environment?
Yeah, completely true. I mean, probably the answer is in the question. The brief of a startup is probably rather an ambition, yeah, than a known truth. It's easier to understand when you join the board of Credit Suisse or Roche or Novartis or Tesla or Amazon, what it is these companies want to do than if you are on the board of a two-people RegTech company that set out to disrupt the law practice world in a particular country. I think the answer to your question is if you are in a startup, make sure you are completely aligned with what the startup is trying to do. You have to be passionate about that. You have to be interested about that. And obviously you have to have a feeling, to have to stand tall in your boots, that you can add value to, what is it? Typically to owners with a great idea and a special skill, right? Namely coding tech. Yeah, you can add to that company with whatever skill it is. I don't want to go too deep into that now. Maybe in the Q&A later we can bring it back. But that is what you need to do. Whereas of an SME company, you will see there is much more support. There's people that support the board with information. You will have a board secretary who is responsible for all matters relating to the board, who can help you with the onboarding, etc., etc. What is more difficult in an SME company is a more mature organization. Hence, no doubt, it is a far bigger organization, a more complex organization. So digging deep and especially making sure you understand the depths in your particular experience or skill set is what I would recommend to dive into. As I said in the beginning, you have to ask questions, but you will get answers. You're the ultimate responsible for the company. There cannot be secrets. If people want you on the board, but don't want to share information and withhold it from you explicitly or implicitly, you have to scratch your head and say, am I at the right place? Because as you will see from Gillian's contribution later, you are responsible and it has consequences. Yeah, you bear certain risks. So again, stand tall in your boots. And sometimes this means having to bang your fist on the table, or maybe to say, guys, if you don't give me the answer to that, I cannot and will not help you any further than this. So be strong in that.
Thank you, Donald.
Then boards versus management. There's often a blur of names. Together, the executive committee of a company plus the supervisory board are the leadership team of the company. We want to break that down into what is the task of the boards versus the management. Of course, the management may be a different master class, or there's something that you have been educated on or you have experience in as we speak. So we will focus on the side of boards. I think as board owl, that is appropriate. So what does the board do differently than the management team? Well, the board, it's a time horizon question. The board looks further ahead, let's say 5 to 10 years. The board determines where the journey goes to. The management team decides how to get to that particular goal. But they also have to take care of the day-to-day, and the urgent always prevails over the important. So hence, the two are completely complementary and both necessary for a good functioning of any company, I would say. A board has a few main responsibilities. I would like to highlight 3 of them. That's again not an exhaustive list. As I said, there's the strategy of the company. What is the goal? Where are we? What are we aiming at? Where do we want to go? You have to control the company at the same time. So the course that the management team set has to be done within certain boundaries. And thirdly, you have to set up a governance that actually allows the management team. You have to give them the means to actually embark on that journey to reach the goal and fulfill the strategic objectives of the company. I would like to deep dive into number 2 because I think it's rather relevant for a masterclass. I think everybody will have an idea about strategy and an intuitive feel about what governance means, and that is maybe a task that is done that is heavier at the onset of a company, the beginning of a company. But controls is something that is very ongoing, although it's not executional and not operational. It is an ongoing responsibility of a board. And here comes in a third question, which actually, Edith, the lack of our functionality is good here, because in the polling we would have to restrict it to the question which is the most important control, and we would give you 4 answers, multiple choice. But the chat allows us actually to be free format, and we will be following you. So if you would please be kind enough to write in the chat the kind of controls that you think a board signs responsible for. So who is brave and kicks it off?
Well, we got the first kickoff. Thank you so much. There's more coming in. Let me share with you, Donald. We have
I'm reading. I'm also reading. Yeah.
Okay. Elect the CEO and the remuneration, financials and employees, overall supervision, the review of audited financials. One answer is a holding management accountable, which I would say that that would also be one of my favorite.
Risk management is someone who is closely following Credit Suisse, probably. Yeah.
Risk management coming in. Creation of long-term and sustainable shareholder value, also a really nice one. Vision and mission of the company. Management doing their job properly. And the last so far is all internal controls.
Great. You know what? I like this one better than the poll we prepared. So that's geluk bij een ongeluk. No? There are 2 answers that strike me as vague, and I would like to highlight them, namely management doing their job properly and holding management accountable. That sounds very vague, but you know, actually, there is no end to the number of controls that the board needs to do. You give the company a goal, the management team, you give them a governance, and then you have to control if indeed they're doing their job properly. And that is not necessarily only creating profit or the do-good factor of a charity or a foundation. But once an organization is operational, you have a number of obligations. Yeah? You have to pay taxes. You have to pay social charges. You have to act within the laws of the country or the countries that you are active in. You have to keep a proper bookkeeping. Yeah, and those are all things, and all the things you guys have written here, they are right. Internal control framework is a very important one. Risk management mentioned twice. Look at Credit Suisse at this moment, a super important one. The financials, the bookkeeping, as I mentioned. So all your answers are right. That's the good news. What I would like to stress of this particular point of the controls is that it's not just that in the governance setup on the outside, on the onset, you have to make sure that the company actually does these things. You also have to demand proof at certain intervals, may even be yearly, but have the taxes been paid? You have an internal control framework, show us the results. What are the conclusions? What have you come up with as a result of your framework? You have to demand proof. Because you know what? You can appoint a chief risk officer. And again, it's maybe a bit of a cheap example, but go to Credit Suisse. You appoint a high profile, ambitious, talented risk manager on the board and in the management company. And then you run into hedge fund or alternative investment disasters within the span of 1 quarter. Yeah. Risk management means that the board must demand proof that these things have been controlled, how they're controlled, what the conclusions are. Because when it goes wrong, as we heard in the very beginning, the face of the company is that in those cases is the chairman of the board. And you also hear now that there's criticism to Mr. Ronner in Credit Suisse that he let this happen. Is it only his fault? Of course not. It's a very complex organization. But just to show you that this can be personalized very much, and that of course has a reputational impact. So standing tall, demanding of the very ambitious, talented risk management in the executive board, present to us what the risks are. and then do a deep dive on the topic of alternative fund selection processes or whatever. You will have to demand this. Controls are very important. Let's continue. I've told you that we believe in boards and that the phenomenon of advisory boards can be complementary to supervisory boards. Edith mentioned advisory boards. So we wanted to have one slide showing to you why there are two, what the differences are in the two and how they are complementary. Okay, actually there's two slides. You will see the second one in a minute. But in a list of 6 bullets, you see the differences here. A supervisory board is a formal body which has formal roles and tasks. The members have certain risks and liabilities. Since it is something oriented on the very long term, you want a stable composition of people that understand the goal and can make sure that there is no deviation of the mission and vision. And we also saw that in the controls of the company. You want stability for that. And ultimately, you're judged by the group of shareholders in the annual shareholders meeting who can give you a discharge. Yeah? An advisory board is lighter. An advisory board can be ad hoc, can act as a think tank to you. They typically support the management committee and namely the CEO of a company with problems that may occur out of the blue. As a result, you may also want to change the composition of an advisory board more often, simply because life is also not stable and you may be faced with different problems from one year to the other. And the members on an advisory board don't have a personal liability. Again, probably a very good slide for your handout and to take away and fall back to whenever you feel like it.
We already have, Donald, one comment from Catherine. Thank you for sharing, Catherine. She shares with us that as a manager, I have found more value in our advisory board than in our supervisory board.
Well, I'm personally very happy to hear that, and we will see another example of that actually in a minute. And it's indeed the value of an advisory board will be perceived by the management team and the CEO because they help you with your job. Additional brains, additional skills, additional experiences, etc. And they help you. So I'm not surprised to hear it. The value of a supervisory board is one that is imposed by law. Yeah. So it's a must-have, and therefore not more or less important, just different. Yeah. I can tell you one thing: if you're supposed to have a supervisory board and you don't have one, or it is not acting in accordance with the law, or just a formality, and we'll get back to that in a second too. Then you will see that all of a sudden it's not a matter of what value does it add, but what problem does that create for me. So the one is a must-have, and the other one is something that's indeed closer to your world and can add value to probably more closer to your business success.
Donald, we have more very interesting questions coming in. And one question from Sophie is, what are exactly the liabilities of supervisory board members? And there's another question following later.
Excellent. May I ask you to be patient for 7 minutes? Gillian's part is exactly about this, and I would not want to spoil that. And by the way, she's much better in that than I am, if that's okay, Edith.
Yeah, of course. And we also have a second question from Angelica, who's asking, could you please give some examples of fixed tasks for supervisory board members?
Can I give the same answer?
Yes, of course you can give the same
Leave
answer.
it to Gillian to enlighten
later.
us in about 7 minutes and 2 or 3 slides from now. So maybe we can park the questions around supervisory boards for Gillian, and after her contribution, maybe part of it will become clear whilst going through her slides. You can combine the two. You can have a supervisory board and an advisory board. If you choose to have one, we recommend to listen closely to Christelle and have a strongly engaged, highly diverse number of partners that can actually play both roles. It can be your think tank, as well as the people who play the role of strategy, control, governance, and anything else that is formally demanded from them. If you want to combine them and have both, which can be a personal choice, maybe also a matter of finances, but then keep your supervisory board so small that they are properly equipped to do the job, strategy, control, governance, and a few other things, and have strong people in your advisory board, strong as in strong in helping you do your business and making your company successful. Probably also an answer to the first question you just raised, Edith. Then, indeed, this is the moment that I would like to hand over for the deep dive on those supervisory questions to Gillian. Gillian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Donald. Much appreciated. So, as already mentioned, I would like to take the next few minutes to focus on supervisory boards. I will start by breaking down the structure from the various and most common models for supervisory boards, and then moving on to the organism that is the board that you will find yourself in if you accept an appointment, and then finally ending up with some of the questions that were already posed, where we have the individuals that make up the board and highlighting their responsibilities and expectations that are set not only by the legislator, but also by the various stakeholders. As you already pointed out, Donald, this is quite a Shark Tank that you can find yourself in as a supervisory board, and understanding these patterns can certainly help you become very comfortable, and also finding kind of the enjoyable challenges of a board. So, as you've already also mentioned, Donald, supervisory boards have a legal purpose and are quite clearly, and they have also quite clearly defined legal responsibilities within corporations. They define the strategy and oversee its implementation by the management through strategic controls and governance. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, what a board is to do. Now, as you already can see from the slide, there are many ways of organizing this and reaching ultimately that goal. Particularly over time and given different legal frameworks in different countries, board models have evolved quite differently. So you have a Central European, a Scandinavian, a US model, and you'll see that they vary in the closeness between actually the board and the management, and in the composition as to whether or not the board actually takes on the management role itself, or that it delegates that management role to then a management board. So it has a larger gap between the board and the management, or that it becomes quite close to the management, as particularly in the Scandinavian model, where there is quite a lot of closer cooperation between, in particular, as we'll see later on, the chairman of the board and the executive management, bringing basically the boots on the ground for the strategy implementation. What is common to all models, though, regardless, is that the board is elected and instated by the owners of the company. And so, as Donald already pointed out, again, the owners will define who they are looking for to be within their board, and understanding not only the brief from where they want to take the company, but also understanding them, understanding their background, their history of how they have come to this point in time where they are electing a supervisory board, or maybe also thinking about adding an advisory board to that. It is a key in understanding your role, the expectations that are in you, and also becoming comfortable and making sure that you can fill the boots that have been put out there for you to fill. So understanding where your board that you've been asked to join or that you're being considered for fits within these models is one of the factors that can help you to navigate the expectations and the requirements that are set into your appointment. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time to discuss the fourth model, which is the private model, which is kind of a situation that you could probably find yourself generally in an SME or a startup environment. So you have the owners of the company who actually also run the company, and they're asking you to come in as an independent board member, which is of course nice, because they obviously think that you can add something to their board, but also you will basically be sandwiched in the middle between the people who've actually asked you to join and who will elect you formally to the board, and the people that you're supposed to supervise and tell what to do. So again, understanding your environment, understanding where potential conflicts could arise is a key to feeling comfortable and making sure that you can stand tall in your boots and stand up to the owners that may think it would be a good idea to get a new coffee machine every 6 months, even though they should be focused on completely different things. So these types of situations, the more you know ahead of time what you're getting yourself into, the easier it will be for you to navigate the challenges that you will come across. And
Gillian,
also,
you're
yes?
undermined by being in this sandwich. How do you react?
I beg your pardon?
If you're in this sandwich,
if you're being undermined,
you're being arbitraged. The owner says, "Well, I appointed you, but now leave me alone." How do you deal with that?
I mean, there are various legal steps that you can take, but without going into much of that detail. That's very exciting to me as a lawyer, but may bore you guys to death. At the end of the day, I think in every appointment that you take, you have to be aware and you have to understand what your legal obligations are and what your responsibility is. If you can find a dialogue with the owners to change what is not correct, then that of course is a good outcome. But at the end of the day, you have to always be prepared to step away from the mandate, because that's the only way that you can make sure that you have adequately discharged your responsibilities. Because living with the situation on an ongoing basis that is clearly not correct will actually add to your liability. And you can't, ignoring a situation and not becoming active is usually the worst thing that you can do. So address it, try to find a solution, but ultimately always be prepared to step away.
Thank you, Gillian. Actually, there's a very interesting question from Marie Noel coming in. And she says that in her case, in startups, members of the management are also board members. What advice can you give in such situations?
Well, this is typically a situation that happens in smaller environments. So in Switzerland, which is the jurisdiction I know best because this is where I practice law, it is a possibility that the board actually also becomes the management. Or is the management. And as a matter of fact, the law in Switzerland states that the management, so the implementation of the board strategy lies with the board unless the board takes the conscious decision to delegate. And through this delegation, which is from a corporate governance perspective, the right thing to do because you avoid a lot of conflicts of interest. In smaller environments, you just don't have the manpower to divide this out. And oftentimes in startup situations, you will see that actually the founder, so probably one of the largest shareholders, is also the president or the chairman of the board, and is also the delegate of the board, and therefore the CEO who actually brings the strategy on the ground and does the implementation. So this is a situation that you can have, and there you can only hope that there are other persons who can be of influence to make sure that from a governance perspective, the company is run correctly. And this is probably also where an advisory board could add value without having to take on the responsibilities. Because one of the key things and also circling back to Isabel's question earlier regarding startups, be aware that if you become a board member of a startup, a supervisory board member, and you may actually end up having to run the company because say for instance you have a very visionary owner who has this amazing idea. He desperately wants to be the CEO and proves to be completely incapable of putting boots on the ground for this idea. Then you actually have to make sure that either you know, if the company runs out of money, you have to close it down, or you have to kind of take on the responsibilities, fire your CEO, which can be extremely challenging, and take on the running of the company yourself. So these are all scenarios that could come about if you are part of a supervisory board.
Gillian, may I give it a try to look at this from a company perspective?
So if I am so looking at it to say I am the company and what's going to happen, or how do you rephrase your question maybe?
If you mind, if I make a small contribution.
Oh yeah, of course. I thought you were asking me a question. I was like,
sorry
yes.
for being unclear. I'm not exactly sure where Marie-Noël's question comes from, right? You gave one perspective, I'll give another perspective. And Marie-Noël, please by all means tell us if we've missed your question. But I have great sympathy for an owner, a founder who has a business idea. He or she puts in own money and capital at risk, and then says, I'm not going to give some independent member the power over my company. So I am the chairman of the board and the CEO. Thank you very much. I keep total control because it's my money, my idea, and I sit on that. I have sympathy for that. Of course, as Gillian said, if you have people you trust that will add value and not take your idea and your company away from you, it's great. But let's not forget that in the end, this is how how Steve Jobs lost Apple the first time around. Yeah, the company was taken away from him by managers who then ruined it. Yeah, so if you are in that situation, fine. If you have the time to be shareholder, chairman, and CEO, be my guest, but be smart. Yeah, if you want to avoid that as a one-man show or one-woman show, you have the answer to all the questions that can fall over you as a company. Maybe you want to get advice from a board of people, an advisory board, that has the experience, the skills, and can help you coming to faster conclusions, faster decisions, and faster reactions as a group of mentors. And therefore, you don't have the risk that they can take the company away from you, but you do benefit from the additional pair of brains, hands, skill sets, etc. that you have. So if you look at this from a company point of view, we would recommend, if you have these two or three roles, it is 3 positions but 2 roles, that you do take an advisory board to support you.
Thank you very much, Donald. And I mean, I think you're spot on in these types of situations. Actually, if you are asked to to be on a board of a startup, and you have this kind of personal union throughout all the three levels of the organization, then maybe advising to rather implement an advisory board rather than to bring on third parties to the supervisory board is probably quite a large value add. And I think that the situation where you come in as an independent into a startup and you kind of see the situation of a CEO is probably rather a situation where you would be looking at someone who had kind of brought on investors in some debt rounds already, who had large kind of financial influence, I would say, from third parties who had insisted on there being a supervisory board member. So again, understand very clearly who is driving your contribution and who is driving the whole situation, which gives you great clarity into what your role should be and why you've been asked to join a board, be it to clean up, be it to herd the chickens, be it to drive the business development. There can be lots of different angles. And so this is part of the homework, that the more you do it, the more you understand it, the more comfortable you can be that this is the right fit for you.
Thank you, Gillian.
Yeah.
Sorry, we got very positive feedback from Marie Noel, who says this is the answers, I think, of both of you, Donald and Gillian, is very helpful. Thank you so much. And Angelica is asking, what is meant by general meetings on the ownership level band?
The general meeting is another term for the shareholders meeting. So this is the annual meeting of shareholders where the shareholders can they take a report from the company. So general meeting, shareholders meeting, general assembly, these are all different technical terms for the same thing.
That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Okay. Then I think we can move on to our next slide, where we kind of dive into the organism of the board. So a board is usually comprised of various members, and there again, make sure you meet the other members of the board before you take on the responsibility. Make sure that you can work with them, that you can imagine also working with them in difficult situations, that you can have straightforward conversations to them and table any topic that may come up, be it nice to a nice decision to have to take, or very difficult decisions, as in how are we going to steer this company through a pandemic? How are we going to manage the financing of the wages over the next 3 months? So all of these questions can come up, and just make sure, can you see yourself tackling those questions with the group of people that you will join to become a member of? And so again, when you look at the board as such, every board, even though, again, board is a fixed term, every board can organize itself. So it can give itself its own constitution, so to say. It can give itself various subcommittees, so maybe an audit committee, a remuneration committee. And so depending on how it is organized, it's much more formal. There is more time required for meetings, or you discuss everything in the entire board, especially with startups and with smaller companies. You won't see this division into different committees because there simply just aren't enough people to warrant such a complex organization, because complexity can always also add, complexity isn't always a friend of making sure that everything runs smoothly. So in the board is very much a collective which voices its opinion in everyday business through its chairman. So the chairman is the contact to management. The chairman is the contact to the CEO. He or she will relate what is the strategy, what are the ideas of the board going forward, and will be kind of the spokesperson of the board, whilst the other members kind of act even more removed from the management. And this particularly when you make your first step from an executive function into a board function can be extremely challenging, because you're trying to, sometimes you catch yourself trying to implement or influence in a way that you're used for management, where you really need to take a step back and understand you are looking at this from a strategic point of view. You are requesting information to be provided. You are taking reports rather than going proactively into the management and helping with the implementation. Of course, there are such situations, especially again in smaller companies, but nevertheless, it's something that is rather something that the board is not engaged in. So then we'll start ticking the boxes and going onto our last level for the supervisory board, which is really what you probably want to know, is what are my responsibilities? What is my liability to the various stakeholders? So first of all, understand that when you are assigned as a board member, you are always personally assigned. So even though you may be part of a financing company and you may be asked by this company to step onto a board, it is your personal assignment, and no one else is there to back you, to cover you. The buck stops with you, and therefore stand tall in your boots, know what you're getting yourself into. So you have a personal liability, which means that if anything goes wrong, so the liability, of course, is contingent on there having been a case of damage and you not having properly performed your duties, and therefore that having been a causation of such damage. You can provide for a certain protection through a directors and officers insurance. There are many providers there. Sometimes, and I mean almost typically, and this is part of the discussion as you go on board, companies will have a directors and officers insurance, which you will become part of when you are in that company, especially in more established situations. Then this is probably the case. However, again, in a startup situation or in a smaller setup, it can well be that you will have to get your own insurance, and there are many providers. Specifically, if you're not in a huge board, then you will probably easily find this protection that will probably you can easily cover through the remuneration that you receive, which is a point that Donald will touch on later as well.
Gillian, thank you, because Pamela was asking who pays for the D&O insurance, the companies on director's behalf or each director individually. So if we understand correctly from your answer, that is your own responsibility, correct?
You should. So companies can have directors and officers insurance where everyone, so the whole board is included. So it's one of the questions that you should ask. But if you want to be insured and you want to make sure that you are insured, then it is your own responsibility if the company hasn't already provided for it.
Thank you for answering that question, Gillian. And Juliana is asking, while insurance is obviously necessary when part of a supervisory board, do you advise as well to contract an insurance when you are in an advisory board?
No, I think this is really kind of one of the key differences between a supervisory board and an advisory board, is that the advisory board typically is provides advice, and where it is still in the company's discretion whether or not to take that advice, and how they want to implement that. So there isn't a corporate responsibility, there isn't an individual management responsibility, and so from an advisory board perspective, you don't have a personal liability to the company. I mean, in very extreme cases, I could probably dream one up if I kind of put my head together for a while, because the fun thing of fringe risks that we lawyers like to think about after we close our shops up. But no, an advisory board position doesn't require a directors and officers insurance.
Thank you, Gillian. That's a clear answer. Angelica, in the meantime, is asking, can you please describe a bit more in depth what is meant by personal assignment? So your first bullet point.
Mm-hmm. So an assignment to a board is that of a natural person. It is you, Angelica, who is on this board, and it isn't the Angelica Corporation represented by Angelica that has a space on this board. So again, you're either personally assigned because, for instance, you have exactly the right geographical, cultural background and knowledge for a company that is looking to expand into a new market, and therefore the company would like to bring you on board to develop its expansion strategy over the next 5 to 10 years for a particular market. So then it's you personally, but they wouldn't be able to. It is not possible to find then a corporation that specializes in the expansion services for Latin America. Please bring us onto your advisory board and we will make sure that you grow in the market. So it is very much not an entity, it is a personal assignment, and it stops with you. Did that answer the question?
I think for me it does. Angelica, if you would like to elaborate, please let us know. Yep, it answers the questions for the time being. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Good. Any type, yeah, otherwise we go to the last slide. So again, if you look at what your responsibilities are and your liability is, as the board, you are responsible for defining the strategy and then for overseeing its implementation. So you're not responsible for the actual implementation, but overseeing the implementation. So the oversight typically from a legal perspective entails that you pick the right people to implement. So make sure that you have a management team out there that knows what it's doing, that you instruct them properly. What is it that we expect of you? And then to supervise them or to ask for the reporting back in what they have achieved in implementing what you have decided would be a good idea. So if you can show from a board's perspective that you have effectively provided that those 3 points, so you've made sure you got the right people, you've told them what to do, and you've diligently had them report back and also controlled what they report back. This is where the auditors come in, or where third parties come in to make sure that the management is not just hasn't just put together any cute numbers, but what is on the paper is actually also in the bank account. If you can prove that you have fulfilled these points, then that really dispenses you or discharges your responsibility and liability. And so if you come into the situation where you had where something did go wrong. So there has been a damage to the company, which has, in the worst case, caused the company to have to file for bankruptcy. Then there was an adequate causation between what you didn't do and were supposed to do. Then you slide into the situation where your personal liability could kick in. And if I may just kind of frame that, so the liability is really a personal one. So it affects not only your basically it affects your whole personal wealth. It can, in the worst of cases. So having a directors and officers insurance is clearly something that you will want to do. It is not required by law, but it is definitely advisable. And finally, on that fun note, I think I will close my my legal ease tour d'horizon through the supervisory board's ups and downs. I hope I haven't scared you too much, and I'll hand it over to Donald, who can maybe turn this around a little bit more, again, and talk about advisory boards, where all the fun happens.
When I think we can also start this with a nice question, Donald. Yeah, because it does sound a bit scary, Angelica says. But Christine,
it's not so bad.
No, I know, but I think there's a huge difference between, that's what you show us, between the duties of and also the possible damage that can happen when you are in a supervisory board versus an advisory board. And let's turn it into the positive, Donald. And then that's a question which I think a lot of people would be interested in. Are advisory positions normally remunerated?
We indeed have a slide on that. I can jump to that if that helps answering the question, but maybe you will allow me to also share 2 bits of information. I also saw a question, but you will get a team. I would say, as a chairman or chairperson of a supervisory board, you have a team, the board, and that is actually the picture that Gillian showed, sorry for correction, here. Yeah, so you have the chairperson, and there is a team consisting of supervisory board members. That's what she elaborated on there. Secondly, of course, this being a masterclass, we found it important that we dig into this. And actually, this was the entertaining part that Gillian gave you. In the appendix, you will also find all the clauses of the law and the paragraphs of the law, which are really boring to present. And that's why we did it like this, but you can read into them. And we felt we had to spend time on this. But if you look at the last 20, 25 years of let's say, Swiss corporate history, how many companies do you know that went into Chapter 11 or went broke, where actually the board members were held responsible for it? As far, you know, just speaking from the top of my head, Swissair comes to mind, Gillian, right? I think that is
yes, and even
also reputational liability, and I don't think that the board was asked to pay, but of course their reputation was very negatively impacted of those people. So we have to tell you this. At the same time, Gillian, please correct me immediately if I'm wrong, but it is not that it happens every day.
No, you're absolutely right, Donald, and point taken. I mean, taking an entire airline out of the sky, and arguably there having been quite an inactivity on that board, or should we say activities focused on entirely different things than what they should have been doing, namely wining and dining, then they still actually didn't end up having to pay. But I mean, on the other hand, I would say, Donald, that especially with the Swissair case, there was kind of an awakening through the legal, through the legal community, and also with legislators and of course politicians who kind of, you know, found this a very opportune situation to jump onto. Very clearly today, the understanding of boards, and I think this is also where Board Owl comes in smack bang where it should be. Boards are no longer the, or shouldn't be, if you want to do it diligently, a congregation of chums who kind of, you know, have a nice glass of wine and chit chat four times a year, and maybe go on a little trip together. But there are really, these are serious responsibilities. But as I said, if you know what your responsibilities are, there's extremely interesting reading material in the appendix, Donald, with all the legal requirements. If you understand your responsibilities and you make sure that you are active, that you discharge the responsibilities, so make sure that the board meetings are documented, that you receive the information that you require, that you hold management accountable to what and make it report on what it has done, then fully agreed, this is not something that you have to be exceedingly worried about, but rather I think it is a very unique opportunity to bring in your own value that you can add and your own experience. And to tie over,
I see a question,
I think,
from Diana that says,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to tie it over actually to advisory boards, where I think these also from a personal perspective are a very interesting place to kind of to dip your toes in the water, because you have really that feeling of an organism that works together, that works toward the common goal of moving a company forward in its strategic goals and in making sure that it moves in the right direction, but without having kind of all the kind of more scary details of responsibility, of the formal responsibilities that you would have in a supervisory board.
I quickly want to touch upon a point of Gilliana, who says, but it's kind of getting a new trend to blame it on the board. And I think, Gilliana, that it is indeed a trend. You're spot on. If you look at something like when did we vote on in Switzerland on the, excuse my German, the Konzerninitiative was 1 or 2, I say quarters ago, which is really saying boards need to take more responsibility. That is indeed a trend. And given the examples of Gillian, it is correct that boards are made aware of the fact that they are ultimately responsibility. They should live up to that responsibility. But Gillian explained how you can do that. I think it's all in the spirit of the law. You're going to the next slide. I mean, you said it's all a bit heavy and serious and daunting, Gillian, but thank you for going through all of that for us in an entertaining way. And by no means, I didn't want to say that the appendix is not worth reading. It is, but I think the way you presented it is much more digestible than the paragraphs.
No, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So knowing that, why should I be on the board? I mean, after all of this, yes, I can dip my toe in the water and be in an advisory board and don't have the liability. But given that the liabilities will not hit you every day from both an advisory board and a supervisory board, you get very interesting upside, right? First of all, personal development. If I take an example, Tom, if you're still there, please don't take it personal. I'm talking about myself, right? So you are 50 plus, pale, male, at the last stretch in your career. You know what? You may have stopped to develop yourself. Maybe you've developed, organizations allowed you to develop for 3 decades, but now you're giving back. And that's perfectly fine. But you're giving back to the same company where you've worked for a while, you know everything, and it might become repetitive. Yeah. Then adding to that a board position really gives you all of a sudden exposure to, well, first of all, a different company and a different company culture, but also maybe a different industry. that needs your particular skill set, and all of a sudden you feel refreshed again and you get into this next stage of a development. If you are a young professional, Christel said there's diversity in diversity and also in age, whereas it was the old boys network until not too long ago, or maybe even still we are feeling that. What you see today is that companies, established companies, are afraid of change, but they have now realized after the last 12 months that digitalization is something every company needs. And who is better equipped to guide a company in terms of a board membership in the digitalization of an existing old-fashioned business model? It's probably the young tech entrepreneur that has already successfully built and sold 2 companies. Yeah? And all of a sudden you get a 35-year-old on the board because there is a skill. And for this particular person, of course, it's also a development step because it's a tech entrepreneur that all of a sudden gets exposure to established companies. And with that, a new network, and it could be the old boys network, but you wouldn't previously not necessarily get into that because they were different worlds. And all of a sudden you're smack in the middle of that. That again raises your profile. You can put on LinkedIn that you're a serial entrepreneur and board member of Nestle or Credit Suisse or any other company. Actually, and especially for a younger person still wishing to continue a career, that may mean an acceleration because you have more exposure, more experience, and you've become more worthwhile. And of course, all of that goes for an advisory board and a supervisory board a member. So there's lots of upside and lots of good reasons to be on the board. So let's quickly jump into advisory board. And you heard us speak for quite a bit now. We will speed it up, Edith, I think, especially 1 or 2 slides after this that I will skip. But I would like you to listen to Rhonda Barnett, who in 3 minutes very well explains actually what an advisory board meant for her personally or for her company. So let's listen to Rhonda.
I love growing a company, building something where I'm creating jobs in my community. It excites me every day to come to work and to do new things here at Steelworks. Steelworks Design is an engineering firm located in Peterborough, Ontario. We design and build tooling and automation for manufacturers, and we employ 27 people. In 2008, we lost half of our business in the recession. We had never experienced layoffs in our organization prior to the recession. Now we're faced with laying off half of our staff. Originally, we were about to make very emotional decisions. Our advisory board really helped step us back and make very strategic decisions to make sure that the company was sustainable through the recessionary period, that there would be jobs to come back to. My husband works in the business and I work on the business. And running a small company can be pretty lonely at the top. But with an advisory board, you have a professional sounding board to go out and get input and relevant experience to help you make better decisions. After the downsizing of our company, the recovery was actually fairly rapid. It was actually a very successful time, but because of depleted cash resources, it felt very much like a failure. And it was very important to have that mentorship there in that period to let us know that the business was good and the decisions were good and we were moving in the right direction. In preparing for an advisory board meeting, it forces an entrepreneur to behave like a larger corporation. It creates a level of accountability to the entrepreneur, where you're forced to go through your decision-making process to make sure that the tangent you're running down makes sense, that it's going to achieve your strategic goals. Managing an advisory board is not time-consuming. It's time well invested in your business. It takes you only a few hours to prepare and a few hours to execute. But what you get in those few hours would have taken you hundreds of hours by yourself to solve those problems. There's so much that I like about having an advisory board. I have a group of mentors that I can take tough decisions to. I have a network. These are very established business people that we have sitting around our table with very established connections in business, and they've helped us grow our business through their network channels. Steelworks Design is now well above pre-recession levels in sales and in jobs. And now we're looking at scalability of our growth. When we started this company, we thought we would be that $1 million mom and pop shop, but we've grown into this exceptional company where we're working with companies all over the world. It's very exciting.
BDC is the
we should be seeing the slide back again. It's a video from YouTube. The link is below the name here. So if you get the slides, you'll find it again. For the handout, we summarized the 6 points that she mentioned, and I felt it was an excellent, very short summary de facto of the value of advisory boards not being imposed by law, but from the perspective of an entrepreneur. Are there responsibilities in an advisory board? To match the slide of Gillian, it is more your responsibility to add to the business of a company, to the problems of a company. You are closer to the day-to-day, you have less time horizon, but maybe a bigger impact on the success of a company directly, as we heard through your question very early onwards. This is a heavy slide, but I think as a potential board member, it is something we should quickly stop at. If I give you 15 seconds to read through these points, and I'll highlight 3 afterwards. I'll give you 15 seconds. I hope 15 seconds was enough to rate 10 points. Again, in the handout you will find it, and you can digest it a bit more relaxedly. But I would like to focus on 3 things. One of them is time. Being on the board is a serious responsibility. I think that has become clear. To live up to that serious responsibility, you need to spend the time. Yeah? And the time, as I said, is not enough to come into the board meeting 5 minutes before 9. You have to read the pre-material, which may be another half a day or a day even. And then we recommend you engage with the people in the company, the management committee, certain specialist department. All of that may take as much as 2 or 3 days per board meeting that you have. And swapping to the other side, if you have a day job and you're on the board, your boss, who actually pays you, has to be supportive for you spending this time every once and so often, once a year, 4 times a year, or whatever that is. And certain organizations don't like that, and they say no. And other organizations, and banks or the financial industry are prime examples of that. They say, we forbid it because we pay you, it takes too much time, and we are so afraid of conflicts of interest that you cannot be on a board. We at Boardhall find that very sad. We also work with other companies that actually see a board membership of one of their talents as a means of personal development. And in their development programs of staff, they make it a point to assign people to boards to get exposure to different industries, different network, and they're sure it's an investment, not a cost. Of course, at Boardhall, we admire the organizations that make that investment in their people. The third one I would like to highlight is this point, know-how and EQ. Of course, you're on a board because of your experience and know-how, but I would like to highlight emotional intelligence. So EQ is emotional intelligence as opposed to IQ. It's nothing to do with equity. We'll get to the compensation questions in one slide, Edith. But emotional intelligence we find very important because as a board member, you don't run the company. You cannot be ruling the company by command and obey, which a CIO might still be able to do. It's questionable if it's the right style, but it is possible. You are one step away and you will have to guide and lead through conviction, through influencing. Those skills become increasingly important, and hence an emotional intelligence is at least as important as your skill set or your 3 decades of experience in a certain sector. We have a slide on CVs. Read it. I'll skip it for time's sake. Otherwise, we have no time left for questions. This is the answer to the question, Edith, on remuneration. There are some figures again in the appendix. It's very difficult to give an answer what is the right compensation. If you look at the supervisory board members of UBS, Credit Suisse, Roche, Novartis, Nestle, etc., it easily is 250 to 500,000 for a board member and more than 1 million or even multiple millions for the chairman of the board, which in those companies is a full-time job. But it's the super high packages, and it may be, you know, I have asked my uncle to be the chairman of the board, so I have complete control and I'm not bothered by the board, and I invite him for a nice dinner, and he, after 2 bottles of wine, he'll sign everything I put in front of him. You have all extremes and everything in between. What I would like to make a statement on is the kind of compensation. Typically, supervisory board members are compensated for time. You spend 1, 2, 3 days per board meeting, plus the preparation thereof, and you're compensated for the time you invest in that. Whereas you have more flexibility and more creativity that is possible for advisory board members, where you can also compensate for time if you have the money. But if you don't have the money, and I'm thinking of startups or companies in trouble, like Rhonda Barnett's example, you may see, hey, listen, if you bring in new business or new contacts to us, you get a share of that. Or you know what, we cannot compensate you now because we are loss-making. We just have investment and a business idea, and we're building the company or the tool if it's a tech company and it's not yet creating or generating revenues. Maybe you want to stake in the equity of the company, and if the company is successful and new investors come in, you will benefit as a shareholder of the company and you make your profit there. Of course, a mix of the above is very possible. To make it a bit more realistic and not forgetting the uncle and the 2 bottles of wine and the multi-million-dollar packages of the captains of industry, there is a study by consultancy company BDO together with the University of St. Gallen, and the examples of that for SMEs we have summarized and highlighted in the appendix. You will see that the board is affordable for a reasonably profitable company. Shall we do this one as a closure of my part, Edith?
Yes, of course. I think it's
So
very
ask
good.
You to do exactly the same thing as in the beginning and tell us if how comfortable you feel now, again on a scale from 1 to 10.
I'm curious to see what's coming in now. Well, I see 9, 9, 8, 7, 8, and 9 coming in. And 8 to 9.
It's starting to be scary, yeah?
Sorry?
That's very scary, no?
Well, actually, I'm quite happy because I now speak on behalf of all the people who have given their vote. It does look like people have learned something in the last 1.5 hours.
Yeah, thank you, Edith. And of course, that's very, very nice and rewarding to hear. And thank you very much for your nice feedback. This is a masterclass, and especially Gillian's part, I think, is something you need to know. And if you take that away, you certainly are better equipped now than maybe you were 2 hours ago. At the same time, I would like to say this is not a formal and complete board education where we went into every single detail. Those, if you're really interested and you say, I start with an advisory board and see if I add value, great way to start. We do have advisory board positions at Boortaal. If you say, I'm not afraid of supervisory board, but maybe I want to properly equip myself, the big universities in Switzerland, from St. Gallen to Lucerne to Bern, Rochester to Lausanne, they have formal board educations of different depths and for different prices. So then we really encourage you to look into that seriously on top of what we did today. Then, as a quick summary, and the first 3 points are for supervisory boards, also apart from standing tall in your boots, Do remember that the board decides where it goes, where the company goes, the management decides how to get to that goal, and the board and the owners are not operational but guiding. And for both forms of board goes that a cooperation between the owner, the board team, and the executive management team is crucial for a good functioning of a company. And in the end, they form the leadership team together. With that, I would like to hand the words to Delfin, who has been waiting very long now for her part to contribute, and we have time to actually go through that. Delfin, and I think the Q&A we have partially taken along the presentation, Edith, so I hope we are not completely running out of time.
No, we're not running out of time, and for all the people who are giving now question and answers and comments, we'll come back to it after Delfin. So please stay with us. We'll come back to your questions. Delfin.
So thank you very much for all the insights. So now that we know more about boards and the responsibilities of the members, I'm going to tell you more about Boardal, which is an innovative platform that offers matching service for board position as well as education. So I can see actually now in the chat that we're speaking about interesting schools to do board trainings. So I'll tell you more also about the offers we have through Boardal. So Boardal is, first of all, an inspiring community for decision maker. But it's also, as I've just mentioned, a matching platforms that efficiently brings together companies on the one side and individuals on the other side. So our members are individuals looking for board position and companies looking for qualified board members. When we speak about companies, it's non-profits, startups, and SMEs. Now, how does it work? So basically, organization and individuals go through the registration process. During the registration process, as an individual, you'll have to answer some questions about your skills, your sector expertise, as well as your geographical experience, and you'll have to then upload your CV. As an organization, you'll have to put more information about what kind of board members you're looking for, but around the same lines, so skills, sector, and geography. And this allows us, through our algorithm, to do a matching between board opportunities and individuals. So the candidates who has been shortlisted will receive the board opportunity with all the details. And if they give their consent, we will share their Boardal profile as well as their CV with the relevant company. It's then up to the company to assess the different matches they've received and to reach out for interviews with those that they want to speak with. The process is then directly between the company and the individuals, but of course we, Boardal, we are always there to support you. If you have any questions or need help, we're there. In addition to the matching, members of our community get access to a resource library with some guides and some templates, for example, contract templates for an advisory board position or for a corporate board position, and also special offers with our partners. So there I wanted to go back to the education. So just to let you know, we are on the last stage of discussion with a very prestigious business school. And we'll have great offers through this business school for their board classes. I can tell you it's really one of the top ones. So if you basically register to Boardal, you'll be able to see all the details about this and get special offers for their courses. So this I can highly encourage if you're considering a board education. Then I just wanted to mention one of our success stories. So you can see here on the right side the photo of Edith. So if you'll have any questions, you can go to her directly and ask her what happened. So basically it's InnoSource who registered on our platform because they wanted to hire or potentially hire one board member. And they ended up actually hiring 5 of our board members. So this was really a success and we're happy about this. And they're actually not the only company who ended up appointing several of our members. So now I have a question for you, which actually we're going to go through very quickly because we already know now you know a lot about boards. So we hope you are convinced. How many of you are ready to build a board or join a board? If you can quickly answer in the chat, would be great to know. Yes, so we see very positive feedback. So this is very good. Very happy to see that. If it's a fit, yes. Lisa, you should reach out to us if you have some doubts and we can also orientate you. So I just want to finish this by basically presenting a great offer we have for you today. So for all participants of this webinar, we'd like to offer you 20% to join our platform. So we have usually a yearly membership fee of 350 francs, and you'll get the 20% discount on this. By registering, you'll have the ability to create your board owl profile and go through this questionnaire, as I explained. You'll have the ability to be matched with suitable board opportunities. So of course you will receive matches only if they suit your profile. And you will receive also special offers with our partners, access to our resources and invitation to great events like the one of today. If you have any questions about this or before registering, please feel free to reach out to me or through our contact details, which is also in the presentation. You can see here our email, which is success@boardowl.com. I'd be very happy to answer any question you have or help you with the process.
Thank you so much, Delfin. I think that's a great closing. And also what I would like to say from my experience, that if you are matched with a company, that doesn't mean you have to accept. You're always free to make your own choice and also to check with the company. I had conversations with several companies, and with some companies, I realized that maybe it doesn't completely match my personal preference, or it doesn't completely match the expectations what they have. So you always have a choice also to say, no, this is not completely to what I expect. So that's something I wanted to state. We have question and answers, and I would love to come back to one that Sophie has posed while Gillian was talking. We were talking about, at that time, about the supervisory boards, and she was asking if the liability is the same across Europe and or in the US. Gillian, can you please comment on that?
Well, as a lawyer, of course, I have to caveat this, that I'm not an expert on US law or all the European laws, but the principles are essentially the same. So I think that you can safely say that you have to ask yourself this question in any jurisdiction as part of where you're going, and clearly in the kind of developed board or the normal recognized board situations across the US, Europe, and Asia, the situation from a legal perspective is very similar.
Thank you very much for your answer, Gillian. Maya also said, well explained, Gillian, and I do think that board members need to be on top of accounting, legal responsibilities, and corporate governance matters. What do you think about that?
Well, it helps because you do have to discharge your responsibilities, but also always be aware you are part of a group, and in an ideally configured board situation, you will have people that are specifically appointed to a board for their expertise in a certain area. So if you don't have the total in-depth knowledge, particularly say from a corporate governance perspective, as to know what exactly has to be in the annual report from a executive remuneration perspective to meet all the regulatory requirements, then you shouldn't step away from the challenge of being in the board, but ask the question, who is taking care of this within the board? Who can make sure that we as a board have discharged this responsibility? Because I'm here because I have exceptional business development skills, because I have an understanding of where we can take this company in Indonesia in the next 5 years. And that's why I'm here on the board.
Thank you, Gillian. There is a very interesting question coming in from Sarah, and Sarah, it resonates highly with me, so I prefer to take that one personally. Sarah shares with us, maybe a point to discuss after the presentation. Is it fair to say that women take the personal liability more serious than men, and therefore might be more reluctant to actively seek a board position? Is that one of the reasons that women are heavily underrepresented in boards? Gillian, I also would love to hear your opinion about it with your legal and also your personal experience. From my experience, I'd love to share with you, Sarah, that it resonates highly with me because I was scared to go into advisory board positions. If I, through Women in Sustainable Finance, would not have been come across the board aisle, I would never even have thought about it, because I never thought it would be in my range or in my capacity. And I jumped into the water, the cold water, with the board aisle. And of course, they helped me and they guided me and trained me. And then I realized, I think it's a very feminine thing to say that you're not good enough. I'm now actually on several advisory board positions, and I do experience that I am good enough, that I have something to say, that I have experience which is valuable for the companies that I'm working with. It's a great leverage also with the other people within the advisory board. We learn from each other, we learn with each other, but also we leverage on each other when we have discussions. So it's learning, and also I would say an adding up and summing up game for the company, but also for the people within the advisory boards. So that's what I would love to share with you from my personal experience. I was scared too, but we all have our place and we all have our unique capabilities that we can bring in. We just need to have the guts to do it. And with Board Owl, we can do it. And we're also discussing with Board Owl that if you decide to go into advisory board positions together with Women in Sustainable Finance and Board Owl, we're also discussing the possibility of within a few months from now that we'll have another session with people who decide now to join advisory boards, so that we can share experience. So also make sure that you're not going to be left alone when you take the decision to do it. We're going to be there together. We're going to hold your hand. We're going to share experience. We're going to have more training. So we're going to make sure that you are equipped and we're going to get the best out of you. So Gillian, now the word is up to you.
Thank you, Edith. Look, I can only resonate with you. Why would we suddenly change our typical feminine behaviors that we've done throughout? Applying for every job, making sure that we're 100% on every single point in the application, that we feel that we can fulfill the full brief. Why would that suddenly be different for board positions? But I can only resonate with you, and this is also one of the key points that I find in my work also with boards is you might have this responsibility and it might be on your head, but never forget how strong a network you have. I mean, this network that we're building today, the network that Women in Sustainable Finance builds every day and that is there. I mean, don't always feel, really have the courage to reach out. Also, when everything is going well in a board position, reflect it with a mentor. Reach out to someone who you feel comfortable, who has a completely objective
and who can really bring this to you and be your sounding board in how to deal with particular points.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Donald, sorry, I think you would like to say something before I go to the next question.
Depends on what the next question is. I saw a very interesting one that I thought we shouldn't forget.
Well, then go for it. Which one was it?
Angelika raised the question, what are the core skills apart from sector and topic knowledge that would make us strong candidates for a board? I like that question very much. I don't know if that's the one you wanted to go to also. Edith, and I find it a good question. Maybe it relates also to are women more hesitant to go and are more afraid of the risk and therefore want to be 100% sure what it is you have to bring to the table. Well, I think we heard the answer to that. Yeah, you have a lot to bring to the table and just have the confidence. And of course, sector and topic knowledge, which comes with experience or talent, is a very big part of it. The other things that you should think of are maybe not knowledge types, but personality traits. So do you stand tall in your boots? That is something I think that came out of the presentation. It's very good if you bring that to the table. Emotional intelligence, that is very good if you bring that to the table. But also education, you could think of, or a passion. Someone has a great business model and all of a sudden you say, wow, this is really it. I want to be part of it. And you have so much passion for it that you love to put in the time. And I would say that is something important to bring to the table. If you show those elements in the recruitment process, I'm sure you are clearly making your claim more, what did it say, more strongly.
Thank you, Donald. And a question which comes from Lisa. Lisa, I feel your hesitance, so I would love to address that. Also in your answer in the poll. Lisa asks, as a young professional, is it not difficult to enter into a board, as Rhonda in the video speaks of established professionals?
Shall I go for that one?
Maybe
Go.
I'll add it. I'll add in a minute, because there was an interesting a quote earlier from Isabella talking about shadow boards, which is also a way of bringing in a different point of view or another dimension into the discussion of the corporate strategy and the implementation of that. And so typically this then addresses kind of these boards are comprised of company insiders, so younger employees within the company that maybe haven't yet risen through the ranks, but generally have extremely fresh and exciting ideas that may for the company also be of interest, but that would have difficulty being heard if they simply were uttered within a team meeting, because you simply don't have that exposure. So I think as companies are becoming much more aware of the fact, and hopefully this is going to accelerate, of these resources that are so valuable and that they can tap into from an advisory perspective, from a shadow board perspective, that there are very many aspects of how you can become and how you can add value to a board. But you know, luckily a board member below 45, you can still feel young at 45 because you would be a young board member typically here. So this is, you know, got to work for some of it as well.
Donald?
Yeah, that perfect answer. Perfect.
Then thank you. Then Angelica was asking also, maybe Gillian, you can comment on that. Is the supervisory board position full-time?
In larger companies, the chairman position can be a full-time position, in particular, because there you have a lot of tasks that lie with the chairman. But typically, the membership of a board is not a full-time position. What you see typically in terms of the time that you need to spend on a board is probably you have one quarterly board meeting, which will take anywhere between 3 hours and a whole day. And then you need to prepare for that board meeting, which, depending on the substance of the or the volume of the documentation that you receive, that can again change. So maybe in the first or the second quarter, when you're looking at the annual results, then you have more to review than in a different quarter where the finances aren't so predominant. But so you're looking at least at I would say, if you want to do this seriously, probably 2 to 3 days per quarter. But then all of a sudden, you know, especially last year, I saw many board members, and I saw there was a question, you know, how many boards can I get on before I'm kind of in overload? It can be that all of your boards suddenly require you to step in onto all kinds of emergency meetings, and so make sure that you always have the capacity to step in more. If you suddenly have to have a pandemic situation meeting on how are we going to deal with this, what are we going to do with our employees, etc. So there can be extreme situations where all of a sudden you need a lot more time. But if you want to do this diligently, I would say 2 to 3 days per quarter is actually the minimum that you should kind of think about for a kind of quote unquote ordinary board seat.
The bigger the company, the more intense that gets. I think there's a clear correlation between those. And highlighting again the emergency situation, I can promise you again the example of Credit Suisse, and don't read anything else into it than an example. But I can promise you those guys at this moment are on the phone probably on a daily basis, but certainly on a weekly basis with everything that's going on. The developments go so fast, and then that whole team is extremely engaged all of a sudden.
Yeah, thank you so much for addressing these issues. And of course, I also want to say, I think an advisory board position is, of course, a different involvement than a supervisory board position. Tammy is asking, if you're applying to a large corporation's board, what European MBA program is most sought after on a CV or a resume?
I did give a reply to that in the chat. I think that's maybe appropriate, and if I stand up and also give it verbally. I would not think that one MBA is better than the other. Maybe true for executive positions that certain schools emphasize better certain sectors or industries, but for board positions, I would go beyond. I would think beyond MBAs. I would think board education, as I said, from St. Gallen to Brand Rochester to IMD in Lausanne. They have fantastic educations, and go for that, and add that, combine that with maybe an MBA you may already have, or any other education that brought you in your career to what you are. But this additional edge will certainly look well on your resume. Say, I did the XYZ board education. So I know about liability, what I'm getting myself into. I can hit the ground running. I think that is what you should look for, instead of preferring one MBA over the other.
Thank you. Tammy, what we can do for you, because Tammy is asking a question, when we send out the slides, we can comprehend them, Donald and Gillian and Delfin, with the names of the educations that Donald has just mentioned. So we can add that to the slides, and we will provide that to you, Tammy, so that you know that. I think we're already over time, but looking at the interesting participation, we can only say I think it's a good moment to close off. Whenever you have any questions that come into your mind after this meeting, feel free to contact Board Owl or to contact us at Women in Sustainable Finance directly. Thank you all of you so much for being here. I'd like to thank the presenters of Board Owl, because I think, and also Christelle for Women in Sustainable Finance, because I think the cooperation and the combination of our efforts, I hope that you all have learned, as you've seen. Once again, stressed, whenever you decide to take the board position, make sure that we want to make sure that you're not going to be left alone. We're going to help you, we're going to guide you, and we're going to train you, and we're going to share experiences so that we can all learn and all leverage on each other. Thank you all for being here. I wish you all a very nice evening, and I'm very much looking forward to stay tuned with you, all of you, very soon. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Edith.